All right, well, let's go ahead and get our intro started here. We are here today. It's 4:01, and this is the diversity inclusion call. We're going to talk about this new emerging role. I'm sure that all of you on the call have talked about it, discussed it, and are probably considering it as part of your plan going forward if you haven't already. So today we have with us Marie Gallo, who is president of Trident Mortgage. Marie, thanks for being here. We are trying to get Abdul Mohammed on. He should be.
And I was able to call in.
There he is. Okay, so
Yep.
Abdul is the Senior Vice President, Regional Sales Manager at West Banco. So just real quick before we get into the nitty gritty, just want to let everybody know today that this is recorded and attendees will get a copy of it tomorrow. And then also, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please put them in the chat, or you can pop a question into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And all lines are muted at this time, but if you want to raise your hand, if you've got something to say, we certainly would be able to unmute you so you can join into the conversation as well. And we absolutely encourage that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Marie. Let Marie introduce herself. Tell us a little bit about Trident, and then we'll flip it over to Mohammed and we'll get started with our conversation. Marie?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. And Amy, thanks for having me on the call. My name is Marie Gallo. I'm president of Trident Mortgage Company. We're a regional independent mortgage banker located in the Philadelphia market. We are also part of Home Services of America, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services of America, and we are the in-house lender to Fox & Roach Realtors. I know that's a lot to digest there. And in my current role, I oversee about a little over 200 employees at the mortgage company. Hoping to hit the 3 billion mark in volume this year. And as far as my other roles concerned, I'm also the Chief Diversity Officer for Fox & Roach Realtors and the Trident Group of companies.
Thanks, Marie. So Abdul, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your position over there at West Banco?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, Amy. I'm really excited to be able to share this afternoon. So I'm Abdul Mohammed with West Banco Bank, serve as Senior Vice President of Residential Lending for the state of Kentucky and Indiana, where we support over 66 different branches. Our team is spread out, again, between Kentucky and Indiana. However, our entire footprint for West Banco is across a 6-state region, anywhere from Indiana, Kentucky, and then headed east as far east as Maryland. So we're excited to be able to serve quite a few customers in our footprint. We are a very diverse bank from product services and also the ability to help customers with our unique not only product base, but because of the footprint that we serve, we're able to help customers on our portfolio with residential lending as well as our secondary market loans as well. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Abdul. Thanks for being here. So getting into this role, this has been mentioned in a lot of conversations as of late, but Marie, this isn't exactly something that's new for you. Can you tell us more about when you became the Chief Diversity Officer and how long you've sort of have been moving this forward with your companies?
Absolutely. So I was actually named Chief Diversity Officer for our local real estate and financial services organization back in June of this year. But prior to that, I had been launching the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy for Trident Mortgage Company for 3 years. And, and part of it was just, in terms of, we're under so much more regulatory scrutiny. I think that it's becoming more of a polarizing topic in terms of housing and the mortgage market. And for us, it just made sense for us to kind of really pursue this as part of our business strategy. So we started off 3 years ago, and again, we kind of turned internally and also externally in some of our objectives. So we could talk more about that, but for me, it's been a 3-year runway trying to launch this for the mortgage company. And with that, they felt I was the natural person that they should tap to try to do this for the bigger organization. And the bigger organization for us is 6,500 real estate agents and 700 employees.
Wow. And Abdul, we spoke yesterday, so yours is a bit newer than Marie's. Can you tell us a little bit how you've gotten into this new role? And then we'll get into, with both of you, just initiatives and things that you are things that you can do now, or people on the call, the attendees on the call that are interested in implementing this role, or if they already have the role in place, other things that they can do, and stuff that we can do now, but also stuff that planning strategically for the future. So Abdul, give us a little bit of background on your diversity role.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I actually joined WesBanco Bank 3 years ago in April 2017. Had the great pleasure of joining the bank and quickly realized that it was a great institution to work for. Kind of fast forward several years, last fall, I received a request from the president of the bank and the head of HR wanting to talk a little bit more about diversity within the bank. We were coming off of several years of having women symposiums throughout our entire bank footprint, where we were really focused as a bank on helping women grow in our institution into future leadership roles, and wanting to expand that to actually look at the diverse look for the entire footprint as well. So that kind of started last fall, and then this year, with everything that's happened and has been going on, there was more emphasis pushed and putting forward everybody to really focus in on what are we doing now and what can we do in the future. And thus I was asked to chair our current diversity and inclusion committee. So that would be more of an official role versus I'm not an officer, a diversity and inclusion officer, but the community committee chairperson, where we have now broken out into 3 subcommittees, and we can dive a little bit deeper into this as we go into the conversation. But through those committees, we have focused in on 3 different areas, which I think hopefully will be helpful for those that are listening in currently right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marie, let's get into what we can do, what this role means. We started to sort of outline out a couple of things. One of the first things is being strategic about it, right? And then you went into internal stuff that we can do and external. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, and in part, sometimes you have to kind of start small, right? And then kind of build upon there. And to Abdul's point, kind of formulating a council or a committee to spearhead these efforts, I think that is incredibly important, because it takes an army to move these initiatives through. And I continue to say that whenever I'm talking internally to people or talking about diversity in total as a topic, because it doesn't just start with one person. And the way I kind of see it is that you have a council, and then that council develops a lot of kind of tentacles. And how does it reach out to the marketplace? But how does it also reach out internally to touch all of your internal people, whether it's employees, and for us it's real estate agents. And like Abdul, we have probably about 75 office locations within our geographic footprint. And the culture of each of those offices is a bit different. But again, it's trying to make, at the very first pass, trying to make diversity and inclusion an awareness project. So it's really about having conversations and direct dialogues and getting those conversations going, because you've got to recognize as an organization where you're short. So again, to start, I would say start with the committee, but my role as the head of diversity is really about more, making sure that it's part of our strategic plan and making sure it's part of our overall business plan. So that's something that for me, I do see that this is going to be a multi-year effort for us. I am also realistic that this may be something that should be handed to somebody on a full-time basis going forward, because the more you get traction, there will be a lot of initiatives to get through. And we look at two different areas. We look at internally, what are we doing from a general awareness standpoint? What's the training and education behind that? Executive engagement, again, and then hiring practices. How does your workforce look, externally? So, you have to take an introspective look at the numbers and then make sure that really it's the hiring managers are really one of your biggest drivers for diversity internally. And then I would say from an external perspective, it's really the community engagement. And it's kind of far beyond just thinking about real estate and housing and the mortgage industry. It's really, what's your obligation to that community? It's building financial literacy programs, maybe for area high schools, which is a lot of what we've done throughout the last couple of years.
Yeah, a couple of the other things, and something that Abdul, you said and agreed with yesterday was also the executive engagement. So internally, executive engagement. Did you want to talk more about that? Because I know you thought absolutely.
Oh, that to me is huge. So we have a president and CEO that throughout this year, dealing with all the challenges around COVID and the unrest out in different communities and so forth, he's been communicating directly to us, top of the house, to all the employees for the entire bank. And he has taken on the ability to communicate to all employees the importance of how we engage and why it's important that we are engaged in this space. And I think if you can capture from the top of the house someone who is going to not only own it but speak it, that's going to be huge in your organization, because I totally agree with what Marie was talking about. When you start reaching out from there, so our president and CEO says, hey, not only do I want us doing it, but he's actively reaching out to mayors within our footprint to let them know that the bank is interested in being engaged externally around this particular topic. So some of the things that we're currently focusing in on right now through our committee and from the executive level, we talked about these subcommittees, and we've broken it down to community outreach. We've broken it down to internally employee communication and education, and then leadership development. And so, how do we make all our employees more aware? We're going to put together a implicit bias training program where we would have our employees look to go through that program and hopefully intentionally have this set up long term, right? So every year we would have this training in place and then have new hires coming in. And we're looking at all this as a 1, 3, 5 year strategy, right? So that we can continue out into the long-term space, as well as internally, how do we communicate with our current employees and show their value and how important it is to help them develop. So we're looking through our development programs that we can bring in new employees into our space, put them into situations where they can not only learn and excel at their roles that they're coming in at, but then what is it that they're looking to do as well, and be more intentional, right? We're trying to become more intentional around how do we help people develop and grow within our organization. Externally, how do we reach out into our communities? and then partner with our churches and our schools to let them know as well that we want to be in the community, and then we want to be a voice and a resource to help not only from the financial literacy piece for consumers, but how do we engage our business folks as well, right? How do we engage minority businesses that also need that extra help, women-owned businesses that need that extra help? So we're looking at it holistically from an internal and external approach. So I'm glad the outline that you all have that you're working from kind of highlights the importance of why both pieces are going to be crucial for, in my mind, for an organization to be successful at this particular focus.
Yeah, I love the community outreach piece. I mean, we talked so much about it, but it's come up. I mean, it came up on the call just prior to this one, just in general about the lack of education that anybody in high school, but the high school to college age has zero education about mortgages. I mean, they may have a one little finance class about, opening a bank account or something like that, but teaching people about the largest purchase that they're going to make in their life for most, right? And what that means. We had a call earlier today with our entire team, and we have a couple of 25-year-olds on our team. And we just asked them, how do you guys feel about the mortgage industry? How do you, were you skeptical, trying to figure out the different generations? I mean, people who lived through what happened in '08 lost a lot of confidence in the mortgage industry. But I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice if we're not getting out there and giving that education, because when those millennials or Gen Yers are going and are ready to buy a home, they're going to go back to the people probably who educated them also. But I feel like it gives more confidence in general when they know exactly what to expect. They're not looking at 5 different loan officers and saying, which one do I believe? Gabby, one of our team members, said that there is a lot of skepticism in general about anything. They don't want to believe anything that's just given to them, and sign these papers and you don't need to read them. We'll tell you, you don't need to know what they were about.
Yeah.
So, Marie, you had talked about going to the colleges, and I think that was more related to hiring, but education as well, because you're educating those people, but then that's a pool of people that you can potentially hire in and groom, versus going to people who already have mortgage experience. I think that's going to be a large portion of these organizational employees in the future, because
yeah, it's funny. We were talking about this, the other day, and my comment was that this industry is hardly sexy to the typical college student,
Right.
So it's like, and what we've also found in our industry is that a lot of people stick in this industry for many years. They kind of fell into this industry. They didn't exactly plan their lives to be like mortgage bankers, but here we are.
Mm-hmm.
So, but how do you kind of like engage, college students into that process, or anybody, anybody? Like, again, it's about diversifying your employee base, but recruiting to this industry is tough, because it's like, it's not really seen as, as something really pretty. People don't understand it. So I think that in part, it's got to start in the schools, where you're really kind of training for financial literacy, but also talking about like those core topics like real estate, mortgage financing, but even like, how about balancing your checkbook? I mean, just the simple things in life. And you will find that there's very limited coursework in colleges. And I can speak to that because I have 2 college age kids that are both finance majors, and there's very limited, coursework around these topics. So I think that there's, the school systems, colleges need to do probably a little bit more in that space. But what you can do as a mortgage lender is you could try to buy some time in front of these, in front of these students. Our former president of the mortgage company, used to, we're right down the street from Villanova. We have several universities within our geographic footprint, and he would be a guest speaker. They would bring in several guest speakers just to kind of get in front of, a few hundred students and just talk about different topics varying from real estate to mortgage. So you got to make it interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think that one of the other things that we had discussed too, going back to hiring practices, actually, I wanted to mention the looking at resumes, redacting names. You had mentioned that that's, something else is that something that you do or something that you were suggesting?
Actually, a member of our council actually brought that to the table and said, hey, this is a best practice that I've seen in the last organization that I worked for. And we were sitting here like, that's great. We have to deploy this with all the recruiters that we use across our organization.
Right.
So it was a great tip.
Kind of just levels the playing field of just looking at qualifications, and there's even if there's some subliminal bias or anything, it takes that right off the table. And yeah, to your point, you've got to make sure that the recruiting companies that you utilize will also pull from a diverse pool as well.
Right.
And that practice those same criteria. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, Marie, is you also said a good thing to do would be to partner with NMBA, Tony Thompson. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony's been, he's a force in this industry. And if you're an MBA member as well, he's very, very engaged with that group. I will say that Tony is has been trying to tap into several different markets to kind of build out his strategy as part of NMBA. And they're very, very focused in on educating, recruiting from schools, and also looking for very diverse individuals to fill seats. There's other organizations that I know, we've been talking to them too. We're looking for them to help us recruit, going into the future.
Excellent. Great tip. And then also you recommended an R video.
Yes. Yeah. So the National Association of Realtors put out a video back in June, and it has a lot to do with the topic of unconscious biasness, but in terms of how the realtor is kind of transacting with the consumer. I think it was a great video, even if you're not a realtor, but again, this is about housing and finance. You can pick up a lot of the dialogue that could go wrong, when dealing with the consumer. I just think it's a great 45-minute video, and it's a video that we are using to drive internal discussions in each of our sales offices and also within our own diversity council, just so that we can spur conversation about it and what are we picking up from this and where do we need to be better.
Excellent. So Abdul, can you go into detail a little bit more about your committees? I know that you broke it down for me a bit more yesterday, and I think it would be helpful for attendees to hear how you've broken, what those subcommittees are. And I think you just had a meeting with everybody this afternoon. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe you're coming back with some good feedback and new ideas. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we've broken it down into, again, leadership development, employee education, and community outreach. And then from each one of those committees, what we want to do for leadership development, one of the ideas that we came up with was, okay, let's have a forum for minorities that would, again, focus on development, right? How to put together a development plan and talk about who should be engaged in that, identifying what it is that you want to do, what your strengths are, and then what is it that you need to work on. So we talked a little bit about that. And then on top of that, mentorship. So oftentimes employees do better when they have a mentor. I remember going off to school as a young freshman many years ago, and being the first in my family to go to a university. My parents couldn't tell me about the experience, but one thing I benefited from was having a mentor assigned to me as a freshman in college. And then I had somebody that I could go to and run things across and what to expect and how to get certain things done based on what I was trying to do. So when I think about that and fast forward to my career as a lender, I've had many mentors along the way. So oftentimes, having mentors in place, somebody that you can engage and run things across that are going to give you unbiased feedback, are definitely things that's going to help. So we talked about having a mentorship program within that leadership development subcommittee, and want to put together some meat around those particular topics. Specifically on the outreach piece, kind of talking about what Marie just highlighted a lot about, which is engaging our universities and having a program. So if you are a mortgage company or bank, maybe you can do either or, but it may look slightly different. But as a mortgage company, maybe you can develop a plan that would hire in or recruit minorities or anyone, basically, but we're talking about diversity right now. Hire them in and bring them in and put them through several different roles within your company that will give them a taste of processing and closing and as a lender as well, and see where they land, because as you want to grow and expand, oftentimes it's easier to grow from within out, and you win long-term employees by helping them develop. So we talked a little bit about that as well. From education, the employee education piece, we talked about, what is it that our employees need, all employees need, to get a handle or thought process around what does diversity mean to them, right? Because we all grow up with different experiences. I'm born and raised in Chicago, but I live in Lexington, Kentucky now. And my youth growing up in the inner city of Chicago is vastly different from me having lived in Lexington, Kentucky for the last 14 years, and what my adult age children experienced. Right, so that because that difference is there, where a lot of us are most humans are trying to achieve the same goal. It's just that we're being born and raised and living different experiences trying to hit that mark. So I ultimately, hopefully you walk away with the thought of how can I become more intentional in either one of those spaces, or a space that you identified that is highly important for your organization. But what I would challenge you on is being intentional about that, and then having a short and long-term plan to execute around it as well.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you. I loved the story that you told me yesterday about the loan officer that you hired and trained. Did you want to give us all,
Yeah.
kind of set that up a little bit? And I thought that was cool.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I've always been passionate about is, again, how do we help more people in the community become homeowners? Because I believe that home ownership is the foundation to financial freedom. That's just a firm belief that I have. And having worked in the school systems as a chairperson with our diversity, equity, and inclusion piece for the Fayette County Public Schools, second largest school district in the state of Kentucky, what I learned was that with all the students, 35,000 students in our Lexington School District, there were 70 different languages being spoken within our school district, 70 different languages.
Wow.
So one thing that I was always passionate about is how do we help more homeowners and be able to communicate at their level to help build trust? Because I think that trust is, again, one of those foundational attributes that you need in order to have a better community. So one day I was thinking, I was like, how can I hire someone? It's already hard to find good talent individuals, right? Period, whomever you are, no matter, what your background or color or whatever it is. But I wanted somebody specifically that was bilingual that could speak Spanish. So one day I'm walking out the office and I see this young lady with great work ethic, always in the office cleaning it up. I was talking to her. I knew she owned her own business, right? So I'm walking out the door. I turn back around. I look at her and I said, you know what? I am looking for someone that's bilingual, preferably Hispanic, but bilingual that could that may have some interest in being in the finance world, and then I would help teach them mortgage lending. And she's like, okay, I'll see what I can do. And so a week later, I get a call from a young man, and I'm talking to him, and like, great. And I'm like, how did you get my name? And she says, oh, such and such told me to call you. And I was like, oh, he says, yeah, that was my wife. I said, oh, okay, that was your wife. So lo and behold, he has a CPA background, but he was working for Sprint. So my flag antenna went up like, okay, he's working for Sprint, so he might be in a salesy kind of background, but he has a CPA background and he's bilingual. So I went to my executive vice president, Ed Hensley. I said, hey, I want to take a chance on hiring this young man. Can we put him through? And I think you all did a presentation on Zenix. They have a great program where you can have someone take a test to kind of get an idea if they have kind of a salesy background, kind of that farmer's mentality, if you will, versus a hunter's mentality. And I'm using those terms because that's the terms that they use, right? And I was kind of looking for a hunter. Either way, wherever they fail, it would give you an indication on what their strengths and weaknesses are. Fast forward, we put them through that, and then we put them in their new hire training program. So he assumed he knew nothing about mortgage lending. We put him through basically a 3-month program, and by the time he came out of that program, he knew more about FHA, VA, USDA loans than some of my lenders that had been doing this for 15, 20 years. And so then it just gave me the ability to help work with him, mentor him, partner him up with one of my more experienced lenders in the area. And today, he's just back-to-back taking $1 million in new apps each month. So I'm fast forward a year later. So that was just me trying to be intentional about trying to find someone that was bilingual. And now we've done more loans for bilingual customers in the first 9 months of this year than we had in the last 2 years prior to me hiring him on. So again, being intentional and then getting outside the box. I'm plugging Zenix because it's been a great program for us, and our senior leadership team is very supportive of us getting outside the box so that we can find people who can bring value to our bank and to our customers.
Awesome. Thank you, Abdul. Yeah, we talked about language, right, and translation too, Marie. Just being able to have translation services within your organization, if that's possible, or to tap on your current employees to see if anybody does, can speak a second or third language, because I've experienced it myself on the operational side, getting documents that I would have to translate or figure out a way to translate as a processor, because the company I worked for didn't have a department, and not everybody is big enough where they can have a translation department. But I think it's important to, like Abdul said, be intentional and try and have those kind of people in place. And then you're also not letting all that business go because you've got somebody that can service that community, that portion of your community.
Right. And, and hiring, is difficult as is, but, and to Abdul's point, trying to be intentional and finding those people, that's great, but you're never going to cover every single language out there. It's just impossible. So one of the companies that we engaged with was Language Services Associates, and they actually they have a very large call center, and they cover several hundred languages, I believe. And so they offer a couple of different things. They could, number one, they could, if you wanted to call into their center, they could assist you in navigating a phone call with a consumer who speaks a very specific language. Number two, they could also send resources, and I believe they have resources throughout the country, but they're locally based to us. So if we needed somebody to help us attend settlements, and do some translation work around the documents, they can do that as well. The third and fourth services that they also provide are a translation of documents. And the first set of documents, obviously, if it's part of the transaction itself, they could translate for a fee, but it could be pretty pricey depending on how many documents we're looking at here and what kind of documents. Then secondly, and they also do translation for marketing. So if you've got marketing flyers or anything that you would like converted over, and rather than trying to have to do that yourself via Google Translator, which is probably the cheap option, you could kind of take a set of your flyers and have somebody crank through it with their company.
Great, that's a great resource. We put that in the chat for anybody who's interested in jotting down that information. So we've got some probably about 7 or 8 minutes left here on the call. Wanted to just put it out there to the attendees. If anybody has any questions for Marie or Abdul, if you have any comments, is anybody looking to implement this role and you're just kind of looking for even more information, please pop that into the chat or the Q&A. Marie, we also talked about, like, you had mentioned something of self-test before the CFPB tests you. And so what are you using sort of as your litmus test to make sure that you're, if the CFPB does test, that you're going to be passing with flying colors?
Yeah, I encourage everybody to go into the CFPB website and look up the Office of Minority, Women, and Inclusion. They produce standards that are actually used by FHFA, FHA, so a lot of the agencies point to the CFPB standards when it comes to testing, self-testing for diversity. And it's not just, obviously an internal focus, it's also external as well. It's about policies, it's about hiring practices. So that actually, you could use that as a very, very healthy framework if you're trying to go and build out your diversity and inclusion effort. I would also suggest too, we don't necessarily have the playbook on this. We've been kind of, we've grown our diversity effort very organically in the mortgage company, kind of knowing the things that we needed to look out for and things that we needed to do. But I would say that there are big companies out there. We have Vanguard down the road from us, and we know people at Vanguard. We know the people that are running their diversity efforts there. So, lean on the companies that are out there. There's a lot of papers out there. There's annual reports that are published by Toyota. Some of the big companies out there, Google, Apple, they produce work around this. I say go to their annual report and see kind of what their results and their products and the things that they've created to diversify, not only themselves, their internal employees, but also their audience, and see how it speaks to them. I mean, some of these companies have created a beautiful framework for this, and it could easily be replicated.
Awesome, so helpful. Abdul, we got about 5 minutes left. Wanted to reach back out to you and ask you if you had any final thoughts or advice for the people that are on the call, some great takeaways that they could leave with today.
Yeah, you know what? I would just double down on what Marie just talked about. The CFPB has a lot of information out there. So when I hired Mark Laniguez on board, and then I found that I asked him, how do we better communicate to our customers? And he said, well, it would be nice to have documentation in Spanish. When internally it's hard to start to spend funds on things like that, right? So if you want to get a little bit more, have more agility, go out to the CFPB. They have a lot of our standard mortgage documents already in Spanish. And they're already there. It's easy to get them, and I'm sure if you get them to your compliance officer, they would probably not push back on you from using them because they are there. You can get them in Spanish or English, and it's the same docs, a lot of the same docs that you're probably printing out of your mortgage system right now. Also, one thing you can do as you get started is, you don't have to go create the wheel. I personally went out to Forbes top 100 list of top companies that are listed for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then I looked at the top 10. And then from there, I broke it down and said, okay, out of the top 10, now I need to go find the top 5 banking institutions. And so I started looking at what some of the things that they were doing, because again, a lot of it, that's already something there, or corporations that are already being engaging in that space and being graded by another company, so that when a consumer goes out looking for this information, they're already being ranked high, right? So a lot of companies have done some of this work already, and you have a blueprint, if you will, out there that you don't have to go and try to create something brand spanking new. So I would encourage you, again, to get outside the box. Don't be limited to what you think is possible. And one thing we're challenging the committee on is, hey, put it out there on the table and then go to senior management with that, and then let them push back. And then go from there. So, those are the things that I would probably leave everybody with. But again, the intentionality of knowing that diversity is extremely important. Try to take a step back and look at something from someone else's eyes. Believe me, it's quite different. And I've been personally challenged to do that. Being born and raised as a black male, didn't have a choice, right? But I was raised as a Muslim, so that's my religion. And I've been married to a black female that was born and raised as a Christian, and she still follows her religion, and I still follow mine after 28 years of marriage. So ultimately, that in itself is diverse, right? That's diversity within my own house footprint, and so I know it's possible. And that's the one thing I would leave you with. It is possible, but we have to be open to listening to others and understanding where they are coming from. And if you can do that, you will find the success you're looking for.
Thank you so much, Abdul. I would argue that marriage in and of itself is diverse because women and men are so different too. So well done on 28 years. Congratulations. Well, awesome. I mean, guys, this has been jam-packed with so much information and tips for attendees and people that are really trying to move forward with this initiative within their organizations, or even, do better with what they have. So I do truly appreciate you guys taking some time this afternoon to lay this stuff out for us. To the attendees, if you have any other questions or follow-up questions from this that you want to reach out, you can send them to me. I'm sure Marie and Abdul would be happy to answer questions offline as well. So I will send out information with the follow-up email with this recording tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I will say, please keep your eyes out or go to our website to check out 12 Days of TMC, which is our event that we're going to put on at the end of this year in December. We're definitely going to have some more diversity sessions coming up, and or that are going to be implemented in there. And so this topic is not going to go away. Certainly something we should continue to talk about more and more. So with that said, everybody have an awesome afternoon. And Abdul and Marie, thanks again. I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Amy.
Yep.
Bye, everyone.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you both.
Take care.